The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty streets of Ouagadougou as Captain Ibrahim Traoré made his routine patrol through the government district. At 34 years old, Traoré had already earned a reputation as one of Burkina Faso's most observant military officers. His sharp eyes missed nothing, and his intuition had saved lives more than once during his years of service. That particular Tuesday started like any other, with vendors setting up their stalls and government workers hurrying to their offices. However, something felt different in the air. Traoré noticed unusual activity around the central bank building, black luxury cars with diplomatic plates parked in positions that seemed strategic rather than convenient. His military training kicked in as he observed the subtle signs that most people would overlook. The French diplomatic convoy had arrived earlier that morning, officially for a routine meeting about economic cooperation between France and Burkina Faso. Ambassador Philippe Moreau stepped out of the lead vehicle, his expensive suit crisp despite the African heat. He carried himself with the confidence of someone accustomed to getting his way, but Traoré detected something nervous in his movements. What caught Traoré's attention was the timing and the personnel. The diplomatic meeting was scheduled for the afternoon, yet the convoy had arrived at dawn. More concerning was the presence of several men who didn't look like typical diplomatic staff. They moved with the precision of military operatives, their eyes constantly scanning the surroundings in a way that suggested they were planning something far more complex than a simple meeting. Traoré positioned himself at a nearby café, ordering tea while maintaining a clear view of the bank entrance. He watched as the supposed diplomats conducted what appeared to be a security assessment of the building. They paid particular attention to the loading dock, where armored trucks typically delivered and collected valuable items, including the gold reserves that Burkina Faso stored in the central bank's high-security vault. The gold reserves represented more than just wealth. They were a symbol of Burkina Faso's independence and economic sovereignty. For years, there had been rumors about foreign powers attempting to gain control over African mineral resources through various means. Traoré had always been skeptical of such claims, but the behavior he was witnessing made him reconsider those possibilities. As the morning progressed, Traoré noticed a pattern emerging. The French team had divided into smaller groups, with some conducting the visible diplomatic preparations, while others disappeared into areas of the bank that tourists and casual visitors never saw. The coordination was too precise to be coincidental, and the access they had gained suggested someone inside the bank was cooperating with their plans. Ambassador Moreau himself seemed to be orchestrating the operation from his position near the main entrance. He spoke in hushed tones with a man Traoré recognized as Jean-Baptiste Coulibaly, a senior bank official who had studied in France and maintained close ties with French business interests. The conversation appeared intense, with both men checking their watches frequently and glancing toward the vault area of the building. The pieces began falling into place in Traoré's mind. The early arrival, the excessive security personnel, the insider cooperation, and the focus on the vault area all pointed to one conclusion that seemed almost too bold to believe. Yet his years of military experience had taught him that the most audacious plans were often the most successful because they operated beyond what people expected possible. Traoré's radio crackled with routine communications from other patrol units, but he kept his observations to himself for now. Making accusations against foreign diplomats required absolute certainty and careful handling. One wrong move could create an international incident, but ignoring a potential threat to national resources could have even more serious consequences. The morning heat intensified as more bank employees arrived for work, most of them unaware of the unusual activity surrounding their workplace. Traoré watched as the French team completed what appeared to be their preliminary reconnaissance. They had mapped the building's security systems, identified the key personnel, and established their operational framework. What troubled Traoré most was the realization that this level of planning and coordination suggested the operation had been in development for months, possibly years. The French team moved with the confidence of people who had thoroughly prepared for every contingency. They had diplomatic immunity to protect them from immediate arrest, insider assistance to navigate the bank's security systems, and the element of surprise, because no one would expect such a brazen attempt in broad daylight. As noon approached, Traoré made his decision. He couldn't wait for more evidence or additional confirmation of his suspicions. If his instincts were correct, Burkina Faso was about to lose a significant portion of its gold reserves to what amounted to sophisticated theft disguised as diplomatic activity. The time for observation was ending, and the time for action was about to begin. Traoré knew he needed concrete evidence before taking any action against diplomatic personnel. He contacted his trusted colleague, Lieutenant Sarah Ouedraogo, who worked in intelligence gathering. Within minutes, she arrived at his location, with surveillance equipment that would allow them to monitor the French team's communications without being detected. Using directional microphones and frequency scanners, they began intercepting radio transmissions between the various members of the French operation. What they heard confirmed Traoré's worst fears. The team was discussing access codes, security rotations, and transport logistics in terms that left no doubt about their criminal intentions. "The vault access will be clear between 14:30 and 1500 hours, came one transmission in French. Courier vehicle arrives at back entrance precisely at 14:45. Loading must be completed within 12 minutes to maintain schedule. Lieutenant Ouedraogo translated the intercepted communications, while Traoré documented everything they observed. The French team had infiltrated the bank's computer systems and obtained detailed information about gold storage locations, security protocols, and staff schedules. They knew exactly when the guards would be changing shifts and which employees would be away from their posts. The sophistication of their planning became more apparent as the day progressed. They had arranged for a legitimate-looking armored transport vehicle that would arrive during the designated time window. The driver and guards were genuine employees of a French security company, but they had been given false documentation indicating they were collecting gold for routine transfer. To an international reserve facility, Ambassador Moreau's role in the operation was becoming clearer as well. He was using his diplomatic status to provide cover for the heist while maintaining plausible deniability. If questioned later, he could claim he was simply conducting official business at the bank and had no knowledge of any criminal activity by rogue elements within his team. Traoré realized the French had chosen their timing carefully. The afternoon hours were traditionally quiet at the central bank, with most high-level officials attending meetings elsewhere in the city. The skeleton crew remaining on duty would be overwhelmed by the professional execution of the heist before they could mount any effective resistance. The stolen gold was destined for a private aircraft waiting at Ouagadougou Airport. Flight plans had been filed for a diplomatic cargo transport to Paris, with all necessary clearances already approved through official channels. Once the aircraft departed Burkina Faso airspace, recovering the stolen gold would become nearly impossible through legal means. Lieutenant Ouedraogo discovered additional disturbing information through her intelligence contacts. This operation was not an isolated incident, but part of a broader pattern of resource extraction that had been occurring across West Africa. French operatives had successfully conducted similar operations in Mali, Niger, and Ivory Coast, always using diplomatic cover to avoid prosecution. The economic impact on Burkina Faso would be devastating if the heist succeeded. The stolen gold represented not just monetary value, but also the backing for the national currency and collateral for international loans. Its loss would trigger a financial crisis that could destabilize the entire economy and leave millions of citizens suffering. The consequences. Traoré faced a critical decision about how to proceed. Direct confrontation with diplomatic personnel could create an international incident that might damage Burkina Faso's relationships with France and other Western nations. However, allowing the theft to proceed would betray his oath to protect national interests and could encourage similar attacks in the future. He decided to gather his most trusted military colleagues and brief them on the situation. Colonel Amadou Zerbo, commander of the Presidential Guard, listened intently as Traoré presented his evidence. The colonel's expression grew increasingly grim as he realized the implications of what they were facing. "This is an act of economic warfare disguised as diplomacy," Colonel Zerbo concluded after reviewing the intercepted communications. "We cannot allow foreign powers to plunder our national resources while hiding behind diplomatic immunity. The sovereignty of Burkina Faso is at stake." The colonel authorized Traoré to assemble a tactical response team capable of intercepting the gold shipment without creating unnecessary violence. However, they needed to time their intervention perfectly to catch the French team in possession of the stolen gold, making their criminal intent undeniable to international observers. Preparations began immediately for what would become one of the most delicate military operations in Burkina Faso's recent history. Traoré selected soldiers known for their discipline and discretion, men who could be trusted to follow orders precisely even in a tense confrontation with foreign diplomats. The team positioned themselves at strategic locations around the central bank, maintaining communication through encrypted channels while appearing to conduct routine security patrols. They had to remain invisible to the French operatives while being ready to move instantly when the moment for intervention arrived. As 2 o'clock approached, the tension became palpable among Traoré's team. Everyone understood that the next few hours would determine whether Burkina Faso would successfully defend its economic sovereignty or fall victim to sophisticated foreign manipulation. The stakes could not have been higher, and failure was not an option they could afford to consider. The central bank's afternoon shift change occurred exactly as the French team had predicted. Traoré watched through binoculars as 3 security guards left their posts for the standard 30-minute break, leaving only a skeleton crew to monitor the building's multiple access points. The precision of their intelligence gathering was both impressive and deeply concerning. Jean-Baptiste Coulibaly, the compromised bank official, emerged from the main building and walked casually toward the rear entrance. His body language suggested nervousness despite his attempts to appear normal. He carried a briefcase that undoubtedly contained the access codes and authorization documents needed to complete the theft without triggering additional security measures. The armored transport vehicle arrived precisely at 14:45, just as the intercepted communications had indicated. The driver presented what appeared to be legitimate transfer documentation to the remaining security guard, who examined the paperwork briefly before waving the vehicle through to the loading area behind the bank building. Ambassador Moreau maintained his position near the front entrance, engaged in animated conversation with bank executives about economic cooperation agreements. His performance was convincing enough that the bank officials had no reason to suspect anything unusual was happening elsewhere in their facility. The diplomatic meeting provided perfect cover for the criminal activity occurring simultaneously. Inside the vault area, the French operatives worked with military precision to locate and extract the gold reserves. They had studied the storage system thoroughly and knew exactly which containers held the most valuable materials. Their equipment included specialized tools for opening security containers without damaging the contents or triggering silent alarms. Traoré coordinated with his team through hand signals and subtle radio communications, ensuring everyone remained in position without alerting the French operatives to their presence. The timing of their intervention had to be perfect. Too early, and the thieves could claim they were conducting legitimate diplomatic business. Too late, and the gold would already be loaded onto the aircraft. Lieutenant Ouedraogo monitored communications between the aircraft crew and ground control at the airport. The diplomatic cargo flight had received clearance for departure at 1600 hours, giving the ground team just over an hour to complete the theft and transport the stolen gold to the waiting aircraft. Every minute counted in preventing what would amount to one of the largest thefts in African history. The vault team worked methodically through the gold storage area, selecting bars and containers that would provide maximum value while remaining light enough for rapid transport. Their selection process indicated detailed knowledge of gold quality and international market values, suggesting this operation involved financial experts as well as security specialists. Coulibaly nervously checked his watch as the loading process continued. His role as inside facilitator made him the most vulnerable member of the operation if anything went wrong. Unlike the French personnel who enjoyed diplomatic immunity, he could face serious criminal charges if caught participating in the theft of national resources. The armored vehicle's loading compartment gradually filled with gold bars, each worth hundreds of thousands of dollars on international markets. The total value of the theft was approaching several $1 million, representing a significant portion of Burkina Faso's precious metal reserves. The economic damage would extend far beyond the immediate loss, affecting the country's credit rating and international standing. Traoré observed that the French team had planned for various contingencies, including alternate escape routes and backup transportation if their primary plan encountered problems. They had studied Ouagadougou's traffic patterns, police patrol schedules, and airport security procedures to minimize the risk of interception during their escape. The loading process neared completion as the vault team prepared to seal the transport containers and move toward their vehicle. This was the critical moment Traoré had been waiting for, the point where criminal intent became undeniable and diplomatic immunity could not protect the participants from prosecution. He signaled his team to begin closing in on the loading area while maintaining positions that would prevent any escape attempts. The soldiers moved with the same professional precision the French operatives had displayed, but their mission was to protect national interests rather than exploit them. Colonel Zerbo's voice came through Traoré's earpiece, confirming that additional backup units were standing by if needed. However, the primary responsibility for stopping the theft remained with Traoré's immediate team. They had trained for situations requiring delicate handling of diplomatic incidents while maintaining security objectives. The French operatives completed their loading procedures and began preparing for departure toward the airport. The armored vehicle's engine started, and the driver received final instructions through his radio communication system. Everything was proceeding according to their carefully planned schedule, with no indication they suspected any surveillance or intervention. Traoré took a deep breath and made the decision that would determine the outcome of the entire operation. He activated his radio transmitter and spoke the code words that would initiate the tactical response. Operation Sovereignty is now active. All units move to intercept positions immediately. The next few minutes would test everything he had learned during his military career and determine whether Burkina Faso would successfully defend itself against sophisticated economic warfare. There was no room for error in what was about to unfold. Traoré's tactical team moved into position with calculated precision, surrounding the armored transport vehicle before it could leave the bank's loading area. The French operatives found themselves facing armed soldiers who had appeared seemingly from nowhere, their escape route completely blocked by military vehicles that had been waiting just out of sight. The driver of the armored car attempted to reverse toward an alternate exit, but discovered that avenue was also blocked by Traoré's carefully positioned forces. Lieutenant Ouedraogo had anticipated this possibility and stationed additional soldiers at every potential escape point around the central bank facility. Ambassador Moreau's confident demeanor changed instantly when he realized the operation had been compromised. He immediately began demanding to speak with senior government officials, invoking diplomatic protocols and threatening serious consequences for what he characterized as harassment of French diplomatic personnel conducting legitimate official business. "This is an outrageous violation of diplomatic immunity," Moreau declared loudly enough for witnesses to hear. I demand immediate contact with your foreign minister and the French embassy. This incident will have serious repercussions for bilateral relations between our nations. However, Traoré was prepared for such protests and had documented evidence that would justify their intervention. He calmly presented the intercepted communications that detailed the theft operation, making it clear that diplomatic immunity could not protect criminal activity regardless of the perpetrator's official status. The vault team emerged from the bank building carrying additional gold containers, unaware that their escape route had been compromised until they encountered soldiers blocking their path. Their professional composure cracked as they realized the operation had failed at the moment of completion, with stolen gold still in their possession. Jean-Baptiste Coulibaly attempted to blend into the crowd of bank employees who had gathered to observe the commotion, but Lieutenant Ouedraogo had been monitoring his movements throughout the operation. She quickly identified him as a co-conspirator and placed him under immediate detention for questioning about his role in facilitating the theft. The contents of the armored vehicle provided irrefutable evidence of the criminal conspiracy. Gold. Bars bearing the official markings of Burkina Faso's central bank were stacked in transport containers alongside forged documentation claiming the materials were being moved for routine international storage purposes. Traoré opened one of the transport containers in full view of gathered witnesses, revealing gold reserves that belonged to the people of Burkina Faso. The sight of their national wealth being stolen by foreign operatives using diplomatic cover sparked angry reactions from bank employees and local citizens who had gathered at the scene. Colonel Zerbo arrived to oversee the situation personally, bringing additional military personnel and government representatives who could handle the diplomatic aspects of the incident. His presence demonstrated that the intervention had full support from Burkina Faso's military leadership and was not the action of rogue officers. The French operatives maintained their claims of diplomatic immunity while being detained for questioning, but the evidence against them was overwhelming. Radio intercepts, surveillance footage, and physical possession of stolen gold made their criminal intent undeniable to any objective observer. Ambassador Moreau found himself in an impossible position, caught between his role as a diplomatic representative and his participation in criminal activity. His attempts to distance himself from the operation became increasingly desperate as evidence mounted of his central role in planning and coordinating the theft. International media attention began focusing on the incident as news of the attempted gold theft spread beyond Burkina Faso's borders. The story captured global attention because it represented a new form of resource extraction that used diplomatic channels to facilitate what amounted to sophisticated robbery of African national assets. The aircraft waiting at Ouagadougou Airport was immediately impounded by airport security forces working in coordination with Traoré's team. A search of the plane revealed additional equipment intended for transporting stolen gold, including specialized containers and false documentation that would have allowed the materials to enter France without proper customs inspection. French. Government officials in Paris began distancing themselves from the operation, claiming they had no knowledge of any unauthorized activities by their diplomatic personnel. However, the level of planning and resources involved suggested the operation had required approval from higher authorities within the French Foreign Ministry. Traoré supervised the careful documentation of all evidence while ensuring that proper legal procedures were followed despite the unusual circumstances. The case would likely become an international legal precedent for how nations could respond to economic crimes committed under diplomatic cover. The recovered gold was returned to the central bank's vault under heavy security escort, but the incident had exposed serious vulnerabilities in Burkina Faso's financial security systems. Immediate reforms would be necessary to prevent similar attempts in the future, including enhanced screening of foreign diplomatic activities near critical infrastructure. Local. Celebrations broke out as news of the successful intervention spread throughout Ouagadougou. Citizens recognized that Traoré and his team had prevented what could have been an economic disaster for their nation, protecting resources that belonged to current and future generations of Burkina Faso's people. The full implications of the incident would unfold over the following days and weeks, but Traoré had already achieved his primary objective of protecting national sovereignty against foreign economic aggression. His decisive action had sent a clear message that Burkina Faso would defend its resources against any threat, regardless of the source. The interrogation of the captured French operatives revealed the extensive scope of their criminal network and its connections to similar operations across West Africa. Under questioning, several team members admitted their involvement in previous resource extraction schemes targeting Mali, Niger, and Ivory Coast, confirming Lieutenant Ouedraogo's intelligence about a broader pattern of economic exploitation. Jean-Baptiste Coulibaly proved to be the most cooperative source of information once he realized the seriousness of his situation. Facing charges of treason and theft of national resources, he provided detailed accounts of how French agents had recruited him years earlier, gradually building a network of insider contacts throughout Burkina Faso's financial institutions. The recruitment process had been sophisticated and patient, involving legitimate business relationships that slowly evolved into criminal collaboration. French operatives had identified vulnerable individuals within key institutions and systematically compromised them through a combination of financial incentives and subtle coercion over extended periods. Coulibaly's testimony revealed that the gold theft was intended as the culmination of a multi-year intelligence gathering operation that had mapped Burkina Faso's entire precious metals infrastructure. The French team possessed detailed knowledge of mining operations, transportation routes, storage facilities, and security procedures throughout the country. International legal experts arrived in Ouagadougou to assist with the complex diplomatic and criminal aspects of the case. The incident had created unprecedented legal questions about how traditional diplomatic immunity applied to cases involving economic crimes against host nations. The French government's initial denials became increasingly difficult to maintain as evidence mounted of official involvement in the operation. Diplomatic cables intercepted during the investigation showed communications between the French embassy and ministry officials in Paris discussing strategies for accessing Burkina Faso's mineral resources through unconventional means. Ambassador Moreau's position became untenable as his central role in the conspiracy became undeniable. Despite his diplomatic status, he faced the possibility of being declared persona non grata and expelled from Burkina Faso in disgrace, effectively ending his diplomatic career and exposing him to criminal prosecution in international courts. The incident sparked broader discussions within African Union headquarters about the need for enhanced security cooperation to protect member nations against economic crimes committed by foreign powers. Several countries reported similar suspicious activities by various European entities that had previously been dismissed as routine business interactions. President Roch-Marc Christian Kabore personally commended Traoré and his team for their exceptional service in protecting national interests. The president announced that the incident demonstrated the importance of maintaining strong domestic security capabilities independent of foreign assistance or oversight. Economic analysts calculated that the successful intervention had saved Burkina Faso from losses that could have exceeded $50 million when considering the stolen gold's value, plus the economic disruption that would have followed its theft. The country's credit rating and international investment prospects had been preserved through Traoré's decisive action. The case attracted attention from international law enforcement agencies investigating similar resource extraction schemes worldwide. Interpol opened a broader investigation into the French network's activities across multiple African countries, seeking to identify and prosecute other members of the criminal organization. French media outlets began reporting internal government discussions about policy changes needed to prevent future diplomatic scandals involving unauthorized resource extraction operations. The incident had created significant embarrassment for France's foreign ministry and damaged relationships with several African nations. Traoré found himself elevated to national hero status, but he remained focused on the broader implications of what they had uncovered. The attempted gold theft represented just one example of how foreign powers were adapting their strategies for exploiting African resources in the modern era. Security reforms implemented in response to the incident included enhanced screening procedures for all foreign diplomatic activities near critical infrastructure, improved coordination between military and financial institutions, and the establishment of specialized units trained to detect and respond to economic crimes. The recovered gold became a symbol of Burkina Faso's determination to protect its sovereignty against all forms of foreign interference. Display cases in the central bank now showcase some of the recovered bars alongside information about the attempted theft and the successful intervention that prevented it. Training programs developed based on lessons learned from the operation were shared with security forces throughout West Africa, helping other nations identify and counter similar threats to their economic resources. Traoré personally participated in several regional conferences where he shared tactical insights about detecting and disrupting sophisticated criminal operations. The French operatives faced extended detention pending trial, with their diplomatic immunity officially revoked due to their participation in criminal activities. The legal proceedings would establish important precedents for how nations could respond to economic crimes committed by foreign government representatives. The incident fundamentally changed how Burkina Faso approached international economic relationships, with new protocols requiring enhanced verification of all foreign investment proposals and diplomatic activities involving access to national resources. The country had learned valuable lessons about protecting its sovereignty in an era of sophisticated economic warfare. 6 months after the failed gold heist, Ibrahim Traoré had been promoted to colonel and placed in charge of a new National Economic Security Division responsible for protecting Burkina Faso's resources against foreign economic threats. His successful intervention had transformed him from a routine patrol officer into one of the country's most trusted security professionals. The international legal proceedings against the French operatives concluded with unprecedented convictions for economic crimes committed under diplomatic cover. The International Court of Justice ruling established new precedents for how nations could prosecute foreign government representatives who engaged in criminal activities against host countries. Ambassador Moreau faced criminal charges in both Burkina Faso and France, his diplomatic career destroyed by his participation in the theft conspiracy. French authorities, embarrassed by the international scandal, cooperated fully with prosecution efforts to demonstrate their commitment to legitimate diplomatic practices. Jean-Baptiste Coulibaly received a reduced sentence in exchange for his continued cooperation in exposing the broader network of foreign operatives working to exploit African resources. His testimony helped identify and prosecute similar conspiracies in neighboring countries, preventing additional thefts worth millions of dollars. The incident had sparked a continental awakening about the need for African nations to work together in protecting their economic sovereignty. The African Union established new protocols for sharing intelligence about suspicious foreign activities and coordinating responses to economic crimes that crossed national borders. Traoré's National Economic Security Division became a model for other African countries seeking to establish similar protective capabilities. His team developed training programs, surveillance techniques, and response protocols that were adapted throughout the continent, creating a network of expertise in detecting and countering economic warfare. The recovered gold remained in Burkina Faso's central bank, but its security arrangements had been completely transformed based on lessons learned from the attempted theft. New protocols required multiple authorization levels for any access to precious metals, reserves, and continuous monitoring of all personnel with potential access to valuable materials. French-Burkina Faso diplomatic relations gradually recovered from the incident. but under fundamentally changed terms that emphasize transparency and mutual respect. New agreements included provisions for Burkinabe oversight of any French activities involving access to national resources or critical infrastructure. The case attracted global academic attention as scholars studied the evolution of resource extraction methods in the post-colonial era. Universities across Africa began offering courses in economic security that used the gold heist incident as a primary case study for understanding modern threats to national sovereignty. Traoré published a detailed analysis of the operation for security professionals worldwide, sharing tactical insights while protecting sensitive information about ongoing protective measures. His work became required reading for military academies and security training programs throughout the developing world. The broader French network, exposed through the investigation, faced prosecution in multiple countries, with several senior officials receiving prison sentences for their roles in coordinating economic crimes across West Africa. The dismantling of their operations saved African nations from losses that could have totaled hundreds of millions of dollars. Burkina Faso's economy benefited significantly from the enhanced security measures and international attention generated by successfully defending against the gold theft. Foreign investors gained confidence in the country's ability to protect their investments, leading to increased legitimate economic development opportunities. The central bank established a permanent exhibition detailing the attempted heist and successful intervention, educating visitors about the importance of vigilance in protecting national resources. School groups regularly visit to learn about economic security and the role of dedicated public servants in defending national interests. Traoré's personal story became an inspiration for young Burkinabés considering military or public service careers. His example demonstrated how individual dedication and professional excellence could make the difference between national vulnerability and security in an interconnected but dangerous world. Regional cooperation initiatives inspired by the incident created new mechanisms for African nations to share information about suspicious foreign activities and coordinate responses to economic threats. The continent developed unprecedented capabilities for collective defense against sophisticated criminal operations. The long-term impact of Traoré's intervention extended far beyond the immediate prevention of gold theft. His actions had catalyzed a broader movement toward economic self-determination and security consciousness that strengthened multiple African nations against various forms of foreign exploitation. Years later, as Traoré continued to serve his country in increasingly senior positions, he reflected on that crucial Tuesday when his observational skills and decisive action had prevented what could have been an economic disaster. The incident had changed his life completely, but more importantly, it had helped change the trajectory of an entire continent toward greater security and self-reliance. The gold heist that never succeeded became a turning point in modern African history, demonstrating that sophisticated foreign threats could be defeated through vigilance, courage, and unwavering commitment to national sovereignty. Ibrahim Traoré's name would be remembered as the officer who stepped in when it mattered most and caught those who thought they were above the law.